This lesson is about nested assemblies. So we're going to learn about creating components within components that are part of an assembly, like a door or a window. The first step in the process, as we described in class, is to identify the basic module. Here is a finished product. We're going to create this from scratch. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're looking at in terms of measuring. We have two openings here. One which is 36 inches by 6 feet in height, so 3 by 6, and the second opening that is the same height but 6 feet in width. So let's imagine that we have a module. We've identified the basic common denominator of that to be this 36 width window. So if I take it and move it from that point to that opening, we see it fits neatly into a 36 by 6 foot height. If I make copies of it, we can place two of them next to each other and fill up 36 6 foot wide by 6 foot height rough opening. So the concept of rough opening is important to understand. That's the space into which the assembly is going to fit. That is a complete assembly, not just the glazing panels, but the window frame or door frame itself. So I'm going to use the 3 foot 0 by 3 foot 0 by 6 foot height rough opening to create my model. So we have grouped on the wall layer the exterior walls of this building, and we're not drawing into the wall group, but we're drawing outside of it. We remove some of these guys which are distracting. So grouping the walls protects them. So the first thing we're going to do is create a rectangle, the overall size of the assembly we're going to build. So we have a rectangle that's 36 inches wide by 6 feet high. And I could make this a component straight away and start building it, but because I want to first start in the context of the walls so we can see what we're constructing. I'm going to start building the window from the frame to the interior straight away. So I'm going to use the offset tool to, let's say the inside of the framework 2 inches in width. I'm going to take the resulting interior rectangle and Control X and cut it to the clipboard so that all we have now is this perimeter shape, which I'm going to push 12 inches. This is an imaginary construction now. So I'm not detailing what is typically a number, larger number of parts that involves not just the window, but the trim around the window, both exterior and interior. So we're abbreviating this somewhat. Then we triple click to select the shape that we just constructed. And I'm going to create the overall enveloping component and call that window 36 width by 72H. So there, we're creating a component called window 36 width, 72-inch height. You might enter a description. Window 36 inches wide and 72 inches in height. For now, that'll do. Always make sure this is checked. Sometimes it isn't checked by default. So now this is our component so far. We have a solid component, and that's what it's called. Let's talk a little bit about the option to hide the rest of the model when you're modifying a component. This is useful when you're creating something and you want the rest of the model to disappear. So I have that checked right now, which means that when I double click on the component that I've created thus far, the rest of the model disappears. You can see how that can be useful. Now what I'm going to do requires a little bit of thinking. I'm within the component that I called the 36 by 72 window, and I'm going to triple click this geometry, which I originally used to establish this component, but now I'm going to make it a component, which is a component within a component, so a nested component, and this I'm going to call the window frame. I'm not going to get into long descriptive names right now. The important thing is to follow this systematically and understand what's going on. And so I've created a component within the 36 by 72 window called a window frame. By virtue of its being a component, it's protected geometry. So now I can bring back the rectangle that I cut to the clipboard. Let's just draw it again. If I were to bring it back, I would say edit, paste in place. Okay, I'm going to undo that and just draw it again to illustrate why we're nesting components. So I'm creating a glazing panel. I'm going to extrude this to 1/8 of an inch. Let's extrude it to a 1/4 inch because it's a little hard to see the edges. So 1/4 into the value control box, enter. And now I'm going to triple click this, 1, 2, 3, and make it a component. And guess what I'm going to call it? I'm going to call this a glazing panel. Okay. I'm going to paint it with the material glass. So when I double click that component that I just created, it hides everything outside of that component. So it works. It works with nested components as well. When you give anything a thickness like that and you wish for it to be translucent, you have to paint all sides. So I'm going to select this glass, paint the front, paint the back, and the sides, and the bottom. I think there's a way to do this automatically for the shape. Maybe selecting it all, no matter for now. Let's go back to an isometric view. Select the arrow and close this component. Right, so that's the view that we started in. Closing out of it naturally brings you back to the model, complete model context. Let's double click this again. Okay, so now here we are, and two components within the overall components are selectable. The window frame, which I'm going to modify and paint with a wood material. So let's do that. Double click the window frame. Select wood, bamboo, why not? Paint off sides. Bottom. Close that component. Let's take the glazing panel component and just move it back into the frame 6 inches, because we have 12 inches, so now it's centered within that. So what have we got? We have a component called window 36 by 72. That's composed of, double click, two other components nested within it. One is the window frame. The second is the glazing panel within that. So there's your simple one. Let's close that component. And the thickness of these walls are 12 inches, so I'm going to take this window component and just drag it out a couple inches to show that it has some depth. You could look on the inside and see that it sticks out at either end. Whether that's realistic or not. Oh, we also noticed we didn't quite paint the back of the window frame that is nested inside of the window that's 36 by 72. So I'm going to double click that and then double click the window frame and paint it. Finish painting it. All right? Close that component. Close the overall component, and that's where we're at. You can later create multiples of that. 13 minutes is worth watching this and doing it carefully. The steps are the same for any type of assembly that requires nested assembly.